Thank you for your interest in the 2027 James Irvine Foundation Leadership Awards. My name is Cindy Downing, and I'm a program officer at the Irvine Foundation, where I oversee the Leadership Awards program. Today's webinar is meant to help you feel more confident navigating the nomination process. We'll walk you through an overview of the awards program, the nomination process and timeline, the selection criteria, a few practical tips for submitting your nominee narrative, and how to use a submission platform submittable. Excuse me. We'll say the last 20 minutes for your questions. You can submit questions at any time though, using the Q&A tool at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we'll either address them as we go or at the end. So let's go ahead and get started. Can we advance to the next slide, please? The speakers on the webinar today will be myself and my wonderful colleagues from Capital Impact, Stacy Williams and Sarah Dillon. I know that time is often our greatest commodity, so I'll try to keep my opening brief. I'll start with some background about the James Irvine Foundation. Next slide, please. We're a private foundation that has worked to expand opportunities for the people of California since 1937. Today, our grant making is focused on building a California where all low-income workers have the power to advance economically. In 2025 alone, Irvine approved over 160 million in grants to 196 organizations across the state. I'm proud of Irvine's long-standing commitment to fairness and equity for all California workers, and I'm especially delighted that the Leadership Awards program continues to thrive. Can we please advance to the next slide? As many of you likely know, the program plays an important role in lifting up leaders and innovative approaches across issue area, populations, sectors, and regions. It also gives us a meaningful way to learn about and support, excuse me, work that directly improves the well-being of low-income Californians, even beyond Irvine's core grant-making areas. It serves as an important vehicle for Irvine to support California's leadership ecosystem. And now I'd like to speak a bit about the benefits of the Leadership Awards program on the next slide. Each year, the awards program recognizes individuals and pairs who are advancing solutions to the state's most pressing challenges. Through the awards, Irvine spotlights these leaders, helps share their approaches with policymakers and peers, and provides each of their organizations with a $350,000 grant and additional resources to support each leader's work. This year is especially exciting as we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of the Leadership Awards program. Since 2006, Irvine has recognized 138 inspiring and impactful California leaders. And with that, I'd now like to introduce Stacy Williams, Program Director at Capital Impact, External Manager of the Awards Program. Stacy will walk you through the nominations process and timeline. Thank you all for your attention, for joining us this morning. Stacy, over to you.
Thank you, Cindy, and hello, everyone. I am Stacy, and whether you've already accepted your nomination or are still deciding, this webinar is designed to help you understand what comes next and how to put your best foot forward in submitting a competitive nominee narrative. You've already cleared an important milestone by being nominated, and that in itself is recognition of the incredible work that you all are doing across California. So congratulations. So let's take a look at the nominations process. We utilize a two-step nomination process, which we introduced last year. For each nomination, we hope to hear two different perspectives, one internal and one external to the organization. That's two voices, and there are two ways to do that. One is through an external nomination, seen here on the left side of the chart. This nomination would come from someone outside the nominated organization. In step one, nominators submitted a straightforward form with basic information about the nominee and two short paragraph questions about the nominee's impact. Another way you may have been nominated is through an internal nomination, seen here on the right side of the chart. This is for staff members nominating someone at their own organization or leaders nominating themselves. To capture an outside voice in this context, the nominator provided a reference or validator to answer the questions we asked of the external nominators. We are now in step two for both types of nomination, and this step will be very similar moving forward with one important difference, which we'll discuss in a moment. As the nominee, you have been notified of your nomination and invited to move forward to provide more detailed information about your work. This will take place in the Submittable platform. In a moment, we'll walk you through what that looks like in the Submittable system. Next slide. Okay, so step one is now complete. Nominators and validators were asked to respond to two narrative questions. One, what makes this leader's work essential to California's future? Two, how does this leader create meaningful, positive change? Next slide, please. On March 26, nominees were invited to accept or decline their nomination and sign in or create an account in Submittable. Nominees or support staff now complete more extensive information about their work and how it aligns with the selection criteria. Step two does not need to be completed by the nominee themselves or written in the first person. We encourage support staff to work collaboratively on this submission. For those of you that were nominated through an internal or self-nomination, you already have a submittable account. You'll log back into the account that was used to submit and complete the required nominee narrative information. For those of you that were nominated through an external nomination, you may need to create a submittable account to complete step two. If you've participated in years past, you can use that same account. Next slide, please. For those that were internally nominated, one of the key elements that's different about your submission is input from a validator, someone who knows your work and can speak to your impact. Your validator has received a short form with the same questions used in step one. It's important to follow up with your validator to ensure that they complete that form. Otherwise, your nomination won't be able to move forward to review. Remember, only one validator submission is required. And if the primary validator doesn't complete it, the secondary validator will be contacted. You'll be able to track the status of your validator's submission and send reminders to them all within the Submittable platform. Now, my colleague Sarah will share a bit more on how to do that in the portal in a moment. Next slide, please. Let's take a look at the nominations timeline. As you know, all nominations were due on March 23rd, completing step one. We are now in step two. That's the portion on the right side of the screen. External nominees should have received an email invitation to accept or decline their nomination. Accepting your nomination takes you to the nominee narrative form in Submittable. Internal nominees were sent the nominee narrative form from within Submittable. Whoever had the Submittable account that started the nomination will have received that form. If you're still considering whether to move forward, that's completely okay. Our goal today is to give you the information and clarity you need to make that decision. And if you do choose to continue forward, how to submit the strongest possible nomination. Next slide, please. Let's zoom up or step back a bit and talk about the selection timeline. Each year, an independent selection committee of California's leaders identifies 4 to 6 recipients of the James Irvine Foundation Leadership Awards. These leaders are distinguished for their extensive contributions to California, their communities and institutions. They work in diverse fields and reflect the diversity of issue areas and regional diversity of California. The selection committee will consider all substantive information in both parts of the nomination, including the nominators or validators' responses, as well as the nominees' responses to the narrative questions. So, what is the process for selecting selecting who those 4 to 6 leaders will be? After the deadline on April 30th, staff will review and advance the nominations that are most aligned with the awards criteria. In early August, the selection committee will select 10 to 12 finalists who are then notified. Once the finalists have been contacted, all nominees and nominators will be updated about the status of their nomination. Between August and October, the Leadership Awards team meets with the finalists individually to better understand their work and its impact on California. The selection committee will meet again in November to review the learnings from those meetings and select the 4 to 6 award recipients. All finalists and recipients will be notified shortly after that decision. We anticipate announcing those 4 to 6 award recipients in February 2027. The foundation spotlights these leaders and helps share their approaches with policymakers and peers through a reception in Sacramento, meetings with policymakers, and other opportunities and supports. Next slide, please. To help you decide if you'd like to move forward with your nomination, it might be helpful to understand the time expectations of the award finalists and recipients. Finalists will be asked to host a site visit in August or September, in which 2 members of the awards team and an expert in the finalist field of work will learn more about their program's model and impact. The site visit lasts 2.5 hours, and finalists will be asked to invite a few guests who can speak to the work and provide some supplementary information, like existing annual reports, impact info, but no new materials or forms are required. Once recipients are selected in November, we will ask to meet with them to review materials and meet with us about 4 more times in preparation for the February announcement. Award recipients will be asked to participate in the production of a short video about their work and attend the announcement reception in Sacramento in February. Finally, while the funding for award recipients is guaranteed, recipients are still asked to submit a simple grant proposal to receive the funds. There are also additional optional activities in this time frame for award recipients, including more promotional opportunities. Next slide, please. Okay, let's talk about who's eligible to receive a leadership award. To be eligible, nominees must be living. So awards cannot be awarded posthumously. They must reside in California. They can work in any sector that includes nonprofit, public, or private sectors. They can work in any field like education, health, environment, or others. They cannot be planning to retire or leave their role within 1 year of the award announcement. So in this case, they should expect to remain in their position through at least February 2028. There are a couple of important notes as well. Current or recent grantees of the James Irvine Foundation may or may not be eligible. It depends on the details. If that's your situation, I strongly encourage you to check out our FAQ on our website for clarification. Um, Also, to prevent the perception of conflicts of interest, such as personal or financial benefit, we don't allow nominees to have immediate family, financial ties, or have a board member from Irvine staff, Irvine board members, selection committee members, or capital impact staff. Again, I encourage you to check the FAQ for more detail on our conflict of interest policy. And if you're unsure about any of this, we've made it easy. There's an eligibility quiz on our website, at irvineawards.org. It only takes a few minutes and can help confirm if you're good to go. Okay, next slide, please. So now that we've covered eligibility, let's talk about what the selection committee is looking for when reviewing detailed submissions. There are 6 core selection criteria. They serve as the foundation for how your nomination will be evaluated. Here's an overview to keep in mind as you begin preparing your responses. The first is significance. Are you working on an issue that's critical to California, one that affects the quality of life for a large number of people or a community that's been historically overlooked? Innovation. Does your work reflect a new approach or a unique solution? Maybe you're doing something that no one else is doing, or applying a known or proven model in a new context or a new community. Effectiveness. Can you demonstrate your work is making a real difference? We're looking for clear indicators of impact, whether that's data, it can be stories, it can be testimonials. Inclusiveness. Are you building bridges, working across differences, or creating opportunities for underserved communities? Who do you involve in decision making and program design? Timing. Is this a moment of opportunity for your work to grow, influence others, or inform policy? We're especially interested in efforts that are ready to scale or be replicated. Leadership capacity. Are you ready to take the next step in your work? How are you positioned to expand your impact, lead broader change, or bring your approach to new spaces? These criteria are at the heart of how nominees are assessed. So as you prepare your nominee narrative or think about whether or not to move forward, keep them in mind. Strong submissions clearly speak to these areas and provide specific examples or evidence to back them up. Now, I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Sarah, who will give us some tips on submitting a competitive nomination and then walk us through the submittable platform. Sarah?
Thanks, Stacy. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Dillon. I'm the Communications Director at Capital Impact and part of the Leadership Awards team. So a common question that we get asked is like, how can I make my nomination more competitive? And to ensure fairness, we're not able to give feedback on specific nominees or nominations, but we can share some themes that we've seen in strong submissions. So in general, as a nominee, we recommend that nominees have a track record of impact at their current organization, usually at least 2 to 3 years. Likewise, we recommend that the work you're highlighting have measurable results and a story of progress. If the project is still very early or hasn't launched yet, it's less likely to be competitive, and you may wish to wait until there's more of a track record for change and it's ready to scale. We also recommend considering the broader pool of recipients. If your work or project is very similar in issue, geography, and approach to a very recent nominee or a recent recipient, For example, if you were a maternal health organization working in Fresno or the Central Valley, which was someone we recognized in 2025, you might be worth waiting another year. If it's just your general field is the same, say education or health, that's totally fine. And also noting that encouraging you to wait is just for respect for your own time. There's no penalty for submitting or submitting multiple times, many years in a row. Many people do. So you're welcome to still apply. Strong nominations also incorporate outside voices, and the nominations process is designed to make sure that all nominations have this through their nominator or validator. And then we can take a deeper look at some specific tips as you work on step 2. So the first is to focus on all the criteria. Be familiar with those. Every nomination is reviewed and scored based on those 6 criteria. And those criteria will be included in the prompts. So you can do that by following the prompts. And on each question, make sure you respond to the question asked and are paying attention to those specific instructions. We had a question in the chat about word count. And so that is use the space that you're given. We do encourage you to pay attention to those word counts, and they will be provided in submittable. So when you're filling out the form in submittable, it will tell you what the word count is for each question, and it won't let you go over. So you don't have to worry about that as much. If you're drafting it in Word, you can check your count. They are about 200 to 500 words, depending on which question you're looking at. And so we encourage you to use space that you're given and strategically and share what matters the most, because some of those will have a shorter length. Another tip is to be clear about your scope. You can focus on your full body of work, or if you're a large organization, you may, with a lot of projects, you may highlight a specific project or model. If you're focusing on just one initiative, be sure to briefly describe your broader context before diving into that model itself. And then another tip is, I would say, zoom in and zoom out. If you focus on just the theory behind your work and kind of the overarching themes, we may be left wondering what you do on the day-to-day, or what your actions are. And if you share just your day-to-day activities, we might not understand your larger theory of change or what makes your approach unique. So strong nominations tend to do both. Tell us what you do and why you're doing it. And Stacy introduced all the selection criteria earlier, and what we're looking for in those responses. I can share a little bit more about a few of them, the first 3. So for significance, please describe the problem that you're working to solve and why it matters to California. We recommend being specific about the community or the population affected, and try to add some estimate of the scale, how many people are impacted now or could be in the future by this issue, and specifically who you're working with, the scale of who you're working with. For innovation, we ask you to help us understand what makes your work or your approach different. Are you applying a new approach? Are you reviving a traditional one that isn't widely known, or applying it in a new context? Think about whether your work could serve as a model for others in California and beyond. And effectiveness is where we look for results. How have you made real measurable change? Strong submissions will include evaluation data, surveys or case studies, policy wins, behavioral change. This can come both from formal evaluation metrics or anecdotes, stories of impact, especially if they show real life effect of your work on people or communities. And noting that internal metrics, such as like the growth of your own staff or your budget, is less persuasive as the external impact. And then finally, as you work through these answers, we encourage you to connect each section while avoiding repetition. So with a limited word count, like we said, make the most of it, and you can make those responses build off each other instead of reintroducing the same information. The form will always be reviewed as a whole, but we won't ever isolate a single question. So you can assume as people are reading each question, they've read the questions before and allow it to build off of each other. And at the same time, we encourage you to have a consistent pull thread through those questions. So whatever issue or problem you're introducing in the significance is one that then when you share about your innovative approach, the innovation is addressing that problem introduced in the significance. And then similar, when you talk about effectiveness, tell us about the effectiveness of the model that you introduced in the innovation. So have it kind of read through. So that's all for tips. And so now I can walk you through the technology that you'll be using. So nominees received an email that looked like this. The external nominees had these buttons to say accept or decline the nomination. And if you hit the accept button, you'll be sent to Submittable, where you will create a login or account and to move forward with that step 2 form. You can go to the next slide. That will look like this, and you would hit continue. Next slide. Once you're in Submittable, you'll see there's a place you can manage collaborators. So whoever initiates the form and starts the account, they'll be the one ultimately to hit submit, and that's the main contact that will be for the nomination. But you can add collaborators. So if you are a staff member, you could add your nominee, or vice versa. If a nominee is the one who started this and filling out this form, you can add a staff member as a collaborator, and then everyone can be in the form. And if you're part of a pair too, then a leadership pair, you can manage the collaborator and add the collaborator as onto the nomination. Just noting, if you are in a pair, one of you will have to choose to be the primary contact for the nomination that owns the form and submits it, and will receive the follow-up information just based on how Submittable works. And then the nomination title there, oh, if you go back on the slide. The nomination title, that is internal, that is just for our record keeping. We give you that preferred way that we would like you to fill it out, that any information provided in that field does not impact your nomination or the evaluation. So we just recommend or ask that you fill out the year 20, it's confusing, the year is 2027 because that's the year that you've been nominated for, and then your name or the name of the nominees. Okay, next slide. Here in Submittable, it will ask if you received multiple nominations. You will know because last week you would have received multiple emails with and this is again for the external nominee, someone nominated from someone outside the organization. You would receive multiple emails that would have said you've been nominated, like if you got 3 of those emails. And then at the bottom, we list the nomination that was written for you. So you can read and review those. And then we're asking if you were nominated more than one time to select which nomination you would like to accept and have your form be connected to that nomination. So you'll choose, if 3 people nominated you outside your organization, you'll choose one of those, and that's the one that will be reviewed in the process along with your form. So you can just write their name in that field. Okay, next slide. So this is how it will look for, well, both sides, internal and external nominations. You have, when you log in, you can go to My Submissions, and if once you hit Submit, the nomination will show up there, like the Sally test. And while you're still working on it, it'll show up in drafts. So internal nominations, you already submitted, so all of yours will be in My Submission. And then the folks who are just now coming into Submittable, yours will be in drafts until you hit submit. And then if you click on the nomination, that lower circle, the Sally Test nominee, if you click on it, that will open up your nomination. You can go next slide. And then once you're in your nomination, you can see there's these different tabs. So activity will show you what was the latest as far as what you submitted or what we sent you. Messages, you can see copies of the emails you received about the nomination. And then forms is where you see different forms associated with the nomination. So if you go to next slide. For external nominations, if you go to forms, there's only one form that matters, and that's your initial form. So you all are entering Submittable right now, and your initial form is step 2. So that's just all you'll be filling out. You don't need to worry about any other forms in the platform for you if you're just now coming into Submittable. And next slide. And then internal nominations. So this is someone who nominated themselves or nominated by a colleague on their team. The nominee received a notification letting them know that someone had started a nomination on their behalf in Submittable. And then the person with the Submittable account also received a notification from Submittable inviting them into step 2. So those are the communications you should have seen last week. And if you go to next slide. So for these folks, when you go to the forms on your nomination, the initial form was the one that was filled out for step 1 that initiated the process and gave us contact information and started the process with the validator. And now for you all, step 2 will be listed there in additional forms. So if you missed that email from Submittable, you should be able to still log into Submittable, click the nomination, go to forms, and see it there. That's the invitation to submit the nominee narrative form. And then you don't have to worry about any of those other forms that are crossed out. You can go to next slide. If you click on the initial form that you already filled out, you can see if you scroll into it, you'll be able to see your validator request. It will tell you if their validator has submitted. So in this example, the validator has not yet submitted because it says request sent. And you can, from your side, you can resend that request. So if you talk to your validator and they said they missed it or they haven't seen it, you can log in, go to that initial form you filled out, and click that button to resend. It won't let us do that on our side, resending that notification, so that request. So that's a place that you can do that to remind your validator. Or you can log in and you can see if they've submitted. We've received a lot of validator forms already. So you may log in and see that that's been completed. And next slide. That's all for Submittable and for our presentation. I know we've gotten a few questions in the chat, and folks can send in more. Is there a difference between accepting an internal nomination versus an external? It's just, that is just, depends on who initially nominated you. So if you were nominated by someone outside your organization, that's what we're calling an external nomination, and you'll be going to Submittable and starting that step 2 there. And then an internal nomination means that initially the process was started either by yourself or by someone on your team. And ultimately, the form that we're requesting in step 2 is exactly the same. The information's the same, and the end result for internal external nominations will be the same information. The 2 questions asked of validators or nominators, and then the questions asked of nominees and their team. So it's a matter of kind of who initiated the process.
Sarah, there's a question in the chat about who the validator is. So again, it depends on who initiated this process. If there was an easy kind of questionnaire that directed people to the right form. If they're a staff person or an internal person, they were directed directly to Submittable, and in Submittable, they chose who the validator is. So the validator was selected by you if you had an internal nomination. So you'll have to log back into your Submittable account to see who that nominator is, and then you can resend the request and manage that request from within the Submittable platform.
And if you were nominated by someone outside your organization, then your process doesn't require a validator. And the validator does not need to have a Submittable account. They'll be sent a form and they just click that link from their email and answer the questions and submit it. So they don't need to be a collaborator on yours or have an account. If you're unable to access the nominee form, we can drop the link for that step 2 form so that you can, that one won't show up in your Submittable account unless you start a draft for it. So we can reshare that link to get to that project.
So there's another question. If the nominee is nominated externally, then the nominee would create the submittable login. Yes, you certainly can. Support staff can also do this. Again, the nominee doesn't necessarily need to be the one that submits or manages this process. We understand that many times the nominees are executive directors and CEOs and are very busy, and maybe development staff or other support staff may be completing the rest of the nomination, and that's perfectly fine. So if that's the case, then we suggest that the email to proceed went to the nominee. We would suggest, forwarding that to the support staff where they can click accept, create a submittable account if necessary, and then move forward in the process. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the nominee themselves, and support staff can help create that account.
Yeah, so step 2 can be completed by whoever. It's just internally that you can decide if that's the nominee or if you started an internal nomination, the nominator, the staff member. It's up to you all kind of how you want to divide that up, or if you want to collaborate on it together.
If you're having specific challenges with your form and your account, it is best to email us at hello@irvineawards.org, where we can take a closer look at your specific case. So for the purposes of the webinar, we're not going to dig into specific cases. If you've emailed us, that's great. So Uzma, I see your question. You've already emailed us. We'll follow up with you via email so that we can spend some time looking at your situation. Okay, there's another one kind of similar to, should we focus on the work as a whole or a specific program? Sarah, this kind of goes back to your tips. If our organization operates multiple programs, is it more effective to focus on highlighting one specialized program, or should we emphasize the overall impact and collective work of the organization?
That's also up to you. I think you could, it's really dictated by the word count that you have, and if you feel like you can capture it all in that word count, no matter what, if you focus on one initiative or if you stay broad, we encourage you to explain kind of the organization as a whole, and then you may choose to highlight one specific initiative as far as sharing what makes it innovative and what your impact is. That's either way it works.
There are a couple questions related to the board member. The nomination is from a board member. Is that internal? Is that external? Sarah, can you speak to that?
We didn't redirect board members to submittable because the ultimate goal is that the initial nomination or the validator be sharing information from outside the organization and outside perspective. So board members whoever completed your first step, that's fine. We're hoping that board members can kind of share from their experience, their perspective, from the broader field, or from their work, and maybe didn't have the same access to some of the internal information that you'll be using in the second step. Ultimately, we're hoping just to hear different information and different perspectives between those two different pieces of the nomination and the nominee narrative. Yeah, the deadline. Oh, did you want to do that one, Stacey?
No, go for it.
The deadline is April 30th. That's correct, at noon. And same for the validators. The validators, if they haven't submitted yet, we need to have if you have a validator on your nomination, have their answers in by April 30th as well. We went over that, yeah, but by the 15th, we'll reach out to your second validator in hopes that one of them responds by the 30th. I dropped the link in the question, one of the answered questions. That's the link to the project that is basically on that initial email that said, yes, I accept my nomination. If you clicked that accept button, it took you to the submittable project. So I dropped that link in the answered questions as well. And like Stacy said, you can email us and we can help you get set up on the right track as well afterwards. It's great for a validator to be an elected. That's a good example of an outside perspective, someone who can speak to community impact. So absolutely okay. If a pair is applying, they do have the same board count. So hopefully you're speaking to a project or work that you are collaborating on together. And so the impact of that project could be spoken to in one narrative answer.
There's another question about if the nominee was nominated multiple times, does the nominee need to select one of the nominators to move through the process? That is correct. So if you've been nominated multiple times, you have to select the nominator and their kind of narrative answers that you prefer, and you'll indicate that in the submittable form. Just indicate their name, and that's the nomination narrative that will be reviewed by reviewers. But the nominee or support staff submits the next step, the step 2 nominee narrative form with 7 questions. Okay, let me see. Do we recommend 1 or 2 validators? You only need 1 if the first primary validator completes the form. You only need a secondary validator if they don't do it, and we will reach out to them on or before April 15th so that you have a validator put information in.
And ultimately, if 2 end up submitting, we will if they both end up submitting answers, we will just use the submission from the primary validator. So there isn't an advantage to having them both submit. If your ED nominated you as part of a pair and you are not at the same org as the other person, that sounds like it's fine. Hopefully your executive director was able to share some outside perspective from the pair org. And yes, that's ultimately, we just encourage the full submission to have an outside perspective. So in your responses, you may pull in quotes from outside people just to make sure that we have some of that outside perspective and that the nomination and then the nominee form aren't redundant from one another, but no one will be disqualified for that.
This has come up multiple times in the chat. So I put in our YouTube channel. This recording will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, so you can find it there in the next couple of days. We will upload this recording.
We have a question about video testimonials. We don't have have that in our review process at this time. So for the validator, we do ask that it be written responses to those questions. And then in your nominee narrative yourself, if you're sharing testimonials, they will need to be written and put in as part of the word count. The submittable allows you to hyperlink within the form, but just for a fair and equal review process, our reviewers won't click on hyperlinks. So we encourage you to not depend on that for communicating information, whether that's videos or sending the reviewer to outside reports or websites or things. We will only review what is written in those responses.
There's a question in the chat for the narrative section. Can we focus on the leader's role in developing and designing a new innovative initiative that's still in progress, but aims to create long-term community impact? I think this, it goes back to what it seems like this is a good program for maybe like innovation, but as Sarah said, you do want that kind of like through line in your answers to kind of like connect all of the connect the work or the program. So if this is a new program, think about whether or not you're going to be able to demonstrate effectiveness. So there could be a little bit of decision, you could make a decision or a little bit of a balancing act. If it is the most innovative program that you have, are you going to be able to demonstrate effectiveness? Sarah, do you have any other thoughts in terms of that question?
Yeah, I think if there's something new that you're building that's like the next step of an existing program, then that is interesting and compelling, kind of showing like the growth of a program or initiative that already has some impact. I saw a question about, the emphasis on the organization rather than the leader, or is it about the leader's influence? It's both. And you'll see that in how the questions are written. So a lot of what we've been talking about as far as the innovation and the effectiveness, that's going to come from a lot of your existing like organizational information. But ultimately, we hope that you're able to communicate that organizational impact has happened because of the leader who is leading it. And then there are other questions in the form that are going to be more directed specifically at the leader and their leadership capacity and the timing for that leader. And so you'll see that there's a little bit of both in those prompts. Do you have something to add to that, Cindy, or anything that we've?
Yeah, I didn't know if it'd be helpful, but I personally like to, when getting into the more detailed questions, lift up a bit and remind myself of the goals of the awards program. In recognizing and supporting leaders whose work improves people's lives, creates opportunity, and contributes to a better California through advancing innovative, effective solutions that merit expansion or replication, and inform local and statewide policy to expand opportunity. So, the ways in which we achieve those goals is by focusing both on the leader or leadership pair as well as the organization, but ultimately with the goal of advancing the innovative and effective solution. So, while it is confusing a bit that it is a leadership recognition program. Its goal is to have the work the leader is advancing be replicated and scaled and be and influence policy so that their impact can go beyond an individual's work. So however, whatever makes the most sense, it's usually a combination of lifting up the leader and the organization, but all in service of advancing the solution.
So there's still another lingering question about a board member or community partner doing the nomination. And just to kind of emphasize once again, what we're looking for is two different perspectives on this leader's work, one that comes from outside the organization, and then one that has a lot of detail about the work itself that often, only folks within the organization have access to. That could be like, impact or data or statistics or, firsthand accounts. So a board member, a community partner, I think is pretty clearly external. And in the original nomination form, a community partner was directed to the external nomination. The board member, Sarah, correct me if I'm wrong, the board member was directed to an external nomination.
Mhm.
Yeah. So in this case, we directed both the board member and the community partner to an external nomination since they kind of provide maybe a little bit of a different perspective that's outside the daily workings of the organization. I mean, it depends on how involved your board member is in the work. It's certainly feasible that the board member could be extremely involved in the day-to-day operation of the organization. But for the most part, we feel that board members and community partners provide an external perspective on the work of the nominee or the leader, kind of maybe more broadly in the field or in the industry.
And
Um,
whatever nomination got started is fine to continue with that. So you don't have to worry about yours not being eligible based on that.
yeah. So from a technical standpoint, like which system do you go to? Follow the email that you received, and you'll all be directed into submittable at this point to complete the second step.
And a couple questions about needing a validator. That would have been initiated in step one. So no one will need to add a validator at this time. So if yours was a type of nomination that needed a validator, it would have been already started and as part of the step one of that process if one of your staff members was filling that out. The question about the selection criteria, yes, you'll see that the questions correspond with the selection criteria. So you'll be able to respond to each one within the word limits. It's word limits and submittable. And you can touch on them throughout the responses, not just the response tailored to that one, or the question tailored for that one.
Question, if the nomination was internal, a validator is needed. Yes. If the nomination was internal and submitted in the submittable platform, to submit a validator was required. So that that form went out to the designated validator immediately upon submission. So they should have already received that form. If not, log back into that same account and you can see if they've completed it. You can bump the request by resending it in the system, like Sarah showed us. Yeah, so there should already be a validator designated in there.
If your nomination or if your nominee, the nominee should have a track record for change. It's recommended 2 or 3 years. That isn't a black and white rule, so no one will be made ineligible if it's just under or anything around that. That's just a recommendation, so that the projects and initiatives that you're discussing in the nomination and the work that you're talking about, hopefully the nominee was a part of, would just be the recommendation there, and focus on, if it's just under 2 years that they've been there, focus on what they've done in those 2 years rather than work that maybe happened before them, or how they've grown a work that started before them. I think that's all for our questions.
Yeah, it looks like it. Great. Tamara, can you advance to the next slide? We have a quick survey for you to finish before you head out. Tomorrow we'll initiate that poll for everyone on the call, and we would appreciate your answers. Tomorrow we can see your PowerPoint. Thank you. So thank you very much for joining us. Please let us know how this webinar went for you. And again, it'll be available on our YouTube channel. And please reach out to us at Hello at Irvine Awards if you have any additional, or hello at irvineawards.org if you have any additional or specific questions. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you all.